Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio, broadcast from the offices of Cressa. This is your host, Les Smolin, Vistage International, with my co-hosts, Natalie Gosnell at Cressa and Katie Brewer of the Brewer Group. We've got a great lineup of guests for you on our show today, including, how about running down that list for us, Katie?
We have Ahmed Ali, President and Founder of Tista Science and Technology, David Yarkin, Founder and CEO of Procurated, Tom Suder, and he's President and Founder of Atarc, and Laura Ipsen, President and CEO of Ellucian.
Thanks. First up, we've got Ahmed Ali, founder and president at Tista Science and Technology. Welcome, Ahmed. Ahmed, what's Tista?
Tista is a federal contractor. We do our specialties in cybersecurity and health IT.
And how big or small?
We're approximately over 500 employees full-time and north of $160 million annual revenue.
And how'd you get a job there?
How did I get a job there? I actually started the company in 2005, got our first piece of work in 2006, and now supporting over 20 federal agencies as a prime contractor.
Interesting. So where'd you come from? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in College Park, Maryland. We migrated here from Bangladesh in 1976. Grew up in College Park, Maryland, then moved to Bethesda. Grew up in Bethesda and currently still live in Bethesda.
So how old were you when you came from Bangladesh?
I was 4 years old.
And you an only child, or brothers and sisters, what?
I am the only child. I had a older brother that passed away in Bangladesh prior to us moving to the United States.
Was that the reason why you left?
That was one of the reasons, yes. There was between the conflict between India, Pakistan, Bangladesh during the war, my parents decided to move to America to provide a better life and stability for us.
So were you aware of all the conflict that was going on there?
I wasn't as aware since I was still young, but it did impact me quite a bit, all the moving and all the going all over the place, for moving in different schools and 6 different schools.
Once you were here?
Once I was here, yes.
So what was the age difference between you and your brother?
I think it was about 2 years.
Was he older or younger?
He was older.
Okay. So were you guys close at that point?
No, we're just babies. He passed away before I was born.
Oh, okay. So you didn't really know him?
No, I did not.
So you grew up in College Park and then eventually Bethesda. What were Mom and Dad doing when they came here?
My father was an electrical engineer. He worked several jobs in the private industry, then became a D.C. government employee, and my mother was a teacher.
So were they always doing that when they came over here? Or
No, when they came over here, they had to work a lot of odd jobs to make ends meet, get recertified in their degrees and certifications, and when they established a little bit, we were able to move out of multiple apartments and eventually buy a house in College Park.
Were you comfortable in Bangladesh before you came over here? Financially, that is.
No, that's a third world country. We're always struggling there. But we had a decent life. But coming here, we had to start all over again. So started from the bottom of the barrel and slowly worked our way up. So I have a lot of respect for what my parents went through.
And you were as an only child at that point. Were you pretty protected by your parents when you came over at first?
I would like to think so, but because they worked multiple jobs, I rarely saw them. So I was typically on my own between going to school, coming home, and not really seeing them. So I kind of had to find my own path and try to accomplish my own goals and homework and things of that nature.
Wait, you're 5, 6, 7 years old and you're home by yourself?
At times, yes. Yeah. And sometimes we'd have neighbors. We'd have neighbors, or I'd go to the neighbor's house, neighbor's apartment, and stay there until my parents came and got me.
Okay, Katie, what are you thinking?
You said that in the green room that you had moved schools a lot. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, because we were, moving from apartment to apartment, and so it changed school districts and school zones. So it was very challenging having to move so much. Never had a sense of stability.
So as an only child, how did you establish friends and community?
It was very difficult. Every time I thought I'd have new friends, they were starting new friends the following year. So never had a very stable childhood. But it really toughened me up and gave me a different perspective in life. And I started looking at things differently.
Tell me more. How does it impact your life?
We were not very well-to-do financially, so it would always give me an opportunity not only to make new friends, but find new areas I was always very entrepreneurial to find new things to do, whether it's trying to be involved in sports or trying to, cut the grass with my neighbors or shovel their snow or do.
Tell me a little bit about how young you were when you started making money.
I think I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. I just walk down the street and see if I can clean somebody's car or shovel their snow or, help move furniture, whatever it took, just to earn a few dollars here and there.
And why were you doing it so young?
My parents were always working multiple jobs, and we were having some financial challenges, so I wanted to contribute as best as I could or try to be self-independent.
And what did you do differently than all the other kids?
The only thing I think I did differently from all the other kids is I was always looking for a new opportunity to make money.
And how does that translate into what you do now for Tista?
Well, after serving in the military and getting more focused on my career path, I decided I wanted to start a business, and all those experiences in life really helped me understand how to stay focused, more laser focused on how to get things done and accomplish new tasks and goals in life.
What did you do with the money that you were earning as a kid?
As a kid, I started off playing video games a lot, and then I'd realize I was just earning money to waste money. So then I started actually buying things. My first thing I bought was a BMX bike, and I think that really made me realize that, hey, if I actually work hard, I can buy myself something nice where I wouldn't have to burden my parents.
So you saw it as a way to not burden your parents?
Initially, I saw it as a way to not burden my family, correct.
And how did they see it back then?
They didn't know really how to interpret it, but I think they saw it as a positive thing because I stayed away from trouble. Yeah, in their mind, I was actually doing something constructive. But buying a BMX bike was not very constructive to them, but they saw it as staying away from all the other influences that other kids might have been involved in.
What are you thinking, Natalie?
Who were your biggest role models growing up?
I have several role models. I think my first role models were my parents. Haven't seen them work so hard at multiple jobs and struggle so much. So they're definitely the first role models. But other role models that really inspired me are people like Colin Powell, somebody who's migrated from outside the U.S. into the U.S. and really worked hard to develop their career in the military and the private sector. And I was always a big sports person growing up, loved football. My parents never let me play sports because they were always worried about me getting hurt. Somebody like Terry Bradshaw, I'm a big Steelers fan, so my passion and goal in life, which I used to daydream about daily, was to be the star quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That never translated, but that's okay. I'm living vicariously through my kids now.
Why?
So you said, I'm sorry, your parents didn't want you to play sports. What were they concerned about?
My parents didn't want me to play sports for the school team, because they were worried about me getting hurt. After they lost their first child, they thought I'd get hurt and somehow they'd lose me. So I'd always try to convince my mother, you're not going to lose me. I might break a bone or two, but you're not going to lose me. But she was always worried about me getting hurt in any kind of way. So
did it make it harder or easier for you to kind of meet up with other kids, create relationships with other kids?
It helped me create a lot of relationships with other children, because even though I didn't play for the school team, I'd always practice with them, hang out with them. Outside of school, we'd still play sports together on the fields, outside of the team. So that created a lot of friendships, camaraderie, and still maintained a passion for me for sports throughout the rest of my life.
Go ahead, Natalie.
What was your personality like as a kid?
I was very introverted as a kid, and then I think because every time I made new friends, I'd move schools, so I'd start all over again, so it became very frustrating, so I just became very introverted. I think once I got into high school and got into more of sports arena, and then started getting into more in the business side of doing things like installing people's car stereos and doing more odd jobs along the way to try to make some money, it made me realize I need to be more of a marketing person and market myself and my skills. So I think that helped me break out of my shell.
How does that play a role in what you're doing today?
I think my life skills have really gave me the opportunity to learn more about how to project yourself, how to be more confident, how to lead people. The military really shaped my way of thinking and my leadership skills, and I'm very grateful for that.
Now, your parents didn't want you to play sports because they wanted you to be safe, but then you joined the military.
I decided I need to take a stand in my life and make a decision. Since they wouldn't let me play football, I decided I'm going to join the military. Military is something I've always wanted to serve in because I thought it was a great way to give back to our nation and serve in uniform, and I wanted to be proud doing that, which I am today. And so I decided to join the military.
But you also quit school in the process, right?
Yes, I was in my third year of engineering school at University of Maryland, and I was just working various odd jobs, and I said to myself, there's got to be a better way to earn a living and make money and finish my education. So I saw a movie, Top Gun, and that kind of changed the course of history of my life.
And then you went through boot camp and you graduated.
I went to boot camp, and I actually graduated first in boot camp among 93 individuals. And my grandfather came to that boot camp, and he cried. And I was wondering why he's crying. I thought he was proud of me. He said, I thought, I didn't even think you'd make it through to graduate first. It's a proud feeling for the family.
It's a great story. Ahmed, what's the website address?
Tistatech.com.
We've been speaking with Ahmed Ali, president and founder of Tista Science and Technology. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders, and we'll be back right after this break. We're back, and you're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Les Smolin, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to our next guest, David Yarkin, founder and CEO of Procurated. David, what's Procurated?
Procurated is a ratings and review platform for the public sector, sort of like Yelp for government, that lets folks in government see the reviews of suppliers they're going to choose based on the peers, reviews written by their peers.
And how big or small is this?
Growing. So we are a team of 6 dynamic, really smart people, adding 11 new members to the team in 2020.
And it's something that you got a job at because why?
So I started the company in January after having been the chief procurement officer of Pennsylvania and trying to solve a challenge that we faced when I worked for the state.
Okay, what was that challenge?
Trying to find the best suppliers. So when you ask a supplier for references, they always give you their 3 very best references, which you learn very little from. Mm-hmm. So this is a way for us to share the learnings of people all across the country when they're choosing their suppliers.
Great. Where'd you grow up?
Outside of Boston.
Where specifically?
Framingham, Mass.
Framingham, Mass.
Yes.
And what was going on in Framingham, Mass?
So Framingham was actually the largest town in the country. 100,000 people. Just became a city, and very sort of blue collar, middle class town.
And what were Mom and Dad doing?
So my mother was a speech and language pathologist in a public school in Harvard, Mass, and my dad was a German and Latin teacher in Waltham, Mass.
So who are you more like, Mom or Dad?
Probably a mix. Probably a mix.
So what do you take from Mom?
So my mother was someone who was really focused on serving. So she helped kids who really needed her help to become better in the way they spoke. And from that, I learned really the desire to serve others, which brought me into government early in my career and still propels me today to serve people in government.
Were you aware that was her motivation, or was it something else that drove her to do?
No, she talked about it a lot. She talked about the kids that she worked with and the challenges they faced and the pride that she took in helping them improve.
What about Dad? What was he doing?
So, again, a German Latin teacher, and what I took from my dad was just the value of hard work. So I would see him working late into the night, grading kids' papers, and really taking it seriously, not mailing it in. And from that, again, I learned how important it is just to work hard, and that's something that's I've carried with me through today.
And do you have any other brothers and sisters?
Just me.
Single kid. What was it like being a single kid in that household?
It was fun. It was great. I think the one challenge of being an only kid is you had to find friendships elsewhere. There wasn't a ready-made play date in your house, so I had to go and work a little harder to find community. And that sort of sense of community or wanting to be part of community, I I think, again, brought me into government and has been a big motivator for Procurated.
Where your parents were pretty engaged in their work, obviously.
Yep.
Were you kind of like left to your own devices to go do that?
No, they were I think equally engaged with me, with my schoolwork and just making sure that I was growing up with the right kind of values, and I think that has been something that's been important to me with my own 3 kids to do the same.
What do you mean?
Just being involved in their lives, asking them the questions, asking them the 5 whys, trying to understand what's going on in their lives socially, how things are going with them in school, and rolling up my sleeves, and my wife does the same thing, and helping them with homework and being involved in their lives.
Interesting. Natalie, what are you thinking?
Did you play any sports growing up?
I did. I was a mediocre soccer player, probably an even more mediocre baseball player, which helped me when I was a coach of my kids' teams to be really thoughtful and compassionate with kids who weren't as talented. And then I was an average tennis player, but I worked really hard in the off-season to become a better player and to get more time on the team.
What do you mean by that?
So my freshman and sophomore year, I got very little playing time, which was deserved. And so in the off-season, I would run about 3 miles a day wearing 10-pound or 5-pound weights on my ankles, which was probably not the best thing for me later in life, as my body has sort of felt the repercussions of that. But at the time, I think it did make me stronger, and I think it just showed the coach that I was willing to work harder than anybody else to try to get time to play.
Well, this is what, high school?
Yes.
So high school, you went out, average player, and you go out running in the streets of what, Massachusetts, Boston in particular?
Framingham. Yep.
Framingham?
The mean streets, yep.
Must have been cold.
It was winter.
Did anybody question your sanity?
Anybody who I saw, while they were bundled up in their jackets, and I'm out there running like a crazy man.
So how did it affect what happened next?
Well, it worked. It worked. I think the hard work paid off. I was able to get a chance to play on the team and contribute to the team just because I worked hard enough to do it.
Did you get some kind of recognition as a result of that?
Yeah, it was nice. So the coach, Al Gans, who was this amazing coach, he would make the point of saying, at practices, look how hard David's working. And I hope that was a motivator for other people on the team.
I mean, you weren't a starter at all.
Senior year, I started on the team.
Because of that?
Because of the hard work, yeah.
Huh. So how did you feel when he kind of singled you out for your work ethic there?
I was proud, and it was a validator to me then, and I think through my life, that hard work does pay off. And I think that's something that I've seen, and I've tried to reward people who have worked for me for the work they've put in.
How young were you when you started making money?
Or mid-teens. I was a waiter at a great restaurant called The Ground Round. Great not because it was fancy, but great because it was just a great family restaurant.
And you told us you did something after every shift.
Yeah. I'd come home and I'd go into my Commodore 64 computer and I'd, in this very rudimentary spreadsheet, type in the tips I earned for the day, and I would keep track of them day over day.
Why did you do that?
I think it was just I enjoyed seeing in front of me sort of a validation of the hard work that I was doing.
And what did you do with your money? What was the first purchase you made?
Nothing fancy. I was really lucky to have my grandfather's beaten up Oldsmobile to drive around and drive to school in, and I probably used the money for gas. So nothing particularly fun or fancy, but got me from A to B.
Very practical.
And for spending money. My parents were both teachers, so if I wanted to buy something, I had to pay for it myself.
Later on, after you graduated from college, I understand you got your first job working for the mayor of Philadelphia.
I did. Yeah, I was really fortunate. A guy named Ed Rendell, who took a chance on me. I was 21 years old, and I had gotten to know him a little bit, and he hired me as his press secretary.
Press secretary?
Yeah.
How could he do that?
The job was open, and he had the power to give it to me, and he had faith in me. And even though I really didn't have the requisite experience for the role, he had confidence in me that I could do it.
What do you mean he had faith in you? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm curious. I always like to ask the question, what's the best advice you got during your career?
I think the best advice is there's probably a few things. One is to treat people like you'd want to be treated. And I think the one thing I learned from Governor Rendell was not to hire people based on their resume or their educational qualifications necessarily, but really based on who they were and how smart they were, how creative they were, how hardworking they were. And he did that with me for sure. I didn't deserve any of the jobs he ever gave me.
And how does that translate into how you run Procurated?
Well, I think it's true at Procurated. I mean, I think we're looking for dynamic people who love to solve problems, who love to be part of our own community within the company, and someone's pedagogy or qualifications on paper are much less important than how they fit into this dynamic team.
You're all about community.
I have to be, because it's where I live. I mean, the government procurement community is a very tight-knit one. We all look after each other. We're all trying to solve each other's challenges. And that's really what Procurated is, in essence, it's a platform that lets everyone in the government procurement community work together to solve problems by informing each other about how great suppliers can perform for you.
So it's not just about the money.
No. For me, it's never been about money. At any point in my career, it's always been about serving and being a part of a community. And what I've learned also is that when you work hard and you're passionate about what you believe in, then financial success follows it. But in my opinion, if your primary motivation is to make money, you might, but I don't think it's a very rewarding life.
There was something you had said earlier about when you went out to dinner with your parents, I believe, and you were looking at the menus. How does that play into what we were just talking about? What's the story there?
We didn't have a lot of money, so we didn't go out to dinner very often. But when we did, my mother would say, somewhat half-joking, when you're making a choice on what to eat, look at the right side of the menu first. The right side is where are the prices of the entrees. And if you like the right side of the menu, then look left and make sure you can eat it. I think it's just grounded me. Growing up in a very middle class family in a very middle class town has helped to ground me, throughout my life, and hopefully teach those same values to my kids.
Thanks, David. David, what's the website for Procurated?
Procurated.com.
Talking with David Yarkin, founder and CEO at Procurated. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders, and we'll be back right after this break. We're back, and you're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our next guest, Tom Suder, president and founder of Atarc. Tom, what's Atarc?
Atarc is an organization that brings government, industry, and academia together to kind of speed the adoption of technology in the federal government.
And what does that mean?
Well, I look back to World War II when we built the Pentagon in 18 months and we developed the atomic bomb in 2 years. Right now, it takes about 18 months for a technology memo to circulate in the Pentagon.
Things have changed a little bit. And how big or small is Atarc?
We're 6 folks.
And how many companies do you represent?
Probably about 200 technology companies. Some of them are large-scale software companies. Some of them are out of Silicon Valley. Some of them are focused Beltway bandit types here.
And how long ago did you start this?
About 6 years ago.
How come?
Well, I had done a lot of work with other associations, and it was a little frustrating to get things done in these big organizations, so I ended up starting my own.
So you started your own 6 years ago, and what's different about this association from anything else you've ever been associated with?
I think we look at it like we're the special forces of associations.
What do you mean?
We can get things done really fast. If the administration wants to do an event, we can do something like in a week. We don't have to go through a bunch of committees to determine whether this is good for our business model.
So you don't tolerate bureaucracy much?
Zero. I hate
Zero.
it. Yes.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in western Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh, a little town called Aliquippa, steel mill town.
Mm-hmm. And how would you describe that town?
Very tough, very blue collar. We have 3 Hall of Famers in the National Football League from that one small town of 5,000 people.
So that must have had a big impression on you.
It did. It was at the end, kind of like right before the steel mill closed, and it was just a really, really tough neighborhood. And I realized I don't want to, I want to improve my family, and there was other opportunities out there. Just really, really tough economic times there.
And any brothers or sisters?
I've got 2 younger brothers and a sister.
And so you're the oldest?
I am.
What's it like being the oldest?
We were really close in age, so it was really challenging. I wasn't clearly so much older than them, but we had a good childhood. We played a lot. We played sports a lot. We interacted a lot. We were really, really close.
So what was the age spread?
About 4.5 years.
In total?
In total.
Oh, so you're peers almost.
We are. We definitely go at it. I think I had to. My dad worked a lot at night, so I ended up having to help Mom with dinner and managing these kids. And my mom worked as well later.
Why'd they listen to you?
I think I had to develop leadership skills, or they would run all over me. My younger siblings, they were wild ones, so I had to develop my leadership skills early, or they would just run all over me.
You mean Mom just couldn't yell out a command and it would put them all in line?
She was pretty good about that, but sometimes she's not around.
So when she wasn't around, you became basically the authoritative figure there?
Basically, yes.
Huh. You had mentioned Dad was working.
He worked. When we moved to Virginia, he became a McDonald's manager for a long time.
But that didn't happen until later on.
That happened after we moved to Virginia.
Okay. And what was Mom doing?
My mother was raising us when we were in Pennsylvania. When we moved here, I was about 10 years old, so it was in the late 70s, 77, and then she became a school teacher.
And there's something about books that kind of influenced her as much as it did you. What's that?
She read a lot, and she still does to this day. She reads like a book every other day, and she's actually my grammar teacher. And she really taught me the value of reading and writing, and she would definitely correct me every time I made a mistake. So I definitely correct my kids and anybody else that gets in the way on the grammar. So I still pride myself in that.
So you're passing that down generationally.
Oh, yes.
And what did you take from Dad that you use today?
My dad had tremendous leadership skills and motivational skills, and he just really, he just really knew how to get his workers. And I'd worked with him at McDonald's. He just, from that sports mentality, the coach mentality, the captain of the basketball team mentality, and he would help and motivate them in small ways.
Mm-hmm. Natalie, what are you thinking?
Yeah, you mentioned that you're the eldest of 4 children, and also you had 23 younger cousins. Wondering what your role was at family gatherings.
Well, a lot of my cousins actually worked for me, and my brother was a partner with me, so I was always in the middle. I kind of kept up with all my cousins and stayed in their lives even after they went to college and graduated. So I always look at of that generation, I was relatively speaking, the leader.
In addition to that, what kind of personality traits did you have that differentiated you?
I think that I look at how I developed myself. I think it was watching movies and TV. I would look at like Captain Kirk, in Star Trek, and I look back when I watch these old movies, and I'm using some of the same lines that were in the movies, and that was a big influence to me.
I understood when you were young, you collected coins. Tell us a little bit about that.
I did. I got very interested in it, and I was really interested in gold was a little bit out of my league at 13, so I invested a lot in silver coins. I collected them. I had a special knack for when coins were jingling in my pocket, I could detect if there was a silver coin there.
Why did you start collecting coins?
I don't know. I was just fascinated with history, and I just started looking through my change, and then I realized it was a business opportunity. I saw I was at an arcade, and I saw somebody plinking in some silver quarters, so I bought them off them for 50 cents for a quarter.
So you didn't just collect the coins. You actually sold the coins. I
did, and I don't know if people remember, but back in 1980, the Hunt brothers had driven up the price of silver to $50 an ounce, which meant quarters were worth $13.75, and I sold a lot at that peak.
Wow, so you were an early investor.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit about your grandfather.
My grandfather was a big influence in my life. He lived in Northern Virginia. He was in World War II. Barely ever talked about that, of course. That generation didn't. He worked in the Pentagon for about 17 years.
What kind of influence did he have on you?
He just was a very hard worker. He had what Angela Duckworth calls his grit, and I think he taught me that. It's very focused work. He always worked on his cars. He actually started the high school that I went to, a private school, and that was after he had retired. And until he passed, he was working every day out in the yard. He was cutting down trees, and
what
that
do you
really taught
take
me.
from your grandfather into work every day?
I think that grit, that focus, determination. I think it's hard work combined with using your intelligence to figure out how am I going to solve the problem, and don't stop until you actually solve that problem. He was very much like that.
Solving the problem. Tell me more about that.
Well, I think when you have a task on hand, and another, to quote Captain Kirk in 1982, The Wrath of Khan, I don't believe in the no-win scenario. I think that when somebody tells us no as entrepreneurs, we don't take that. You can never start a company. You can't do this. You can't do that. You basically focus until you can accomplish that task.
So you picked that up from your grandfather?
I did do that. He was told many times, you can't start a school. It's impossible. You don't have experience. Just in anything that he would do, a car would be like, you can never fix this car. He would fix the car. Yes.
What are you thinking, Natalie?
So you mentioned you had a lot of grit, but you also were kind of the jokester of the family. How do you strike a balance in your current role?
You've got to have fun. I think I'm a tough boss. I think I'm fair, but you've got to have fun too. And giving somebody a hard time. And I think I got a lot of that from my father. He would always kid employees. Like, somebody would call in and they would say their grandmother died, and my dad would say, "Well, that's the third time this month. Why don't you just come in and work?" He would say things like that and get people to be motivated. And it just helps the whole team if you can keep it light.
You saw him doing this, or you heard him doing this?
I actually worked with my father during my McDonald's career, so I would see him do this on a consistent basis, yes.
And how did you know it was working?
Well, he would get some of the lower performers, I would call them the lower performers, and get them to really punch above their weight. Let's put it that way.
Okay, and so how does that translate into how you lead today?
I think... I try to hire some folks that I think that they may not have been challenged in certain ways, and I like to challenge my employees. I like them to challenge me too. I think that's one thing I've learned over time is I want somebody that's going to challenge me and call me out when I'm not doing it.
But you're the boss. You're okay with that?
I've learned I was not like that. I used to like employees that were my cheerleaders and tell me how great I am. I migrated to I want them to tell me I'm messing things up or I could be doing things better, and I want them and encourage them to give me a hard time.
Interesting. Tom, what's the website address?
www.atarc.org.
We've been speaking with Tom Suder, president and founder of Atarc. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders. We'll be back in a moment. We're back, and you're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our next guest, Laura Ipsen, President and CEO at Ellucian. Welcome. Laura, what's Ellucian?
Ellucian is a software company, and we're architecting the future of higher education in the cloud.
What do you mean?
We build systems that serve students, administrators, and faculty across the United States and 50 countries around the world.
And how big or small is this?
We're under $1 billion company, right under $1 billion, and we have 3,200 employees and over 2,600 customers.
And how'd you get a job there?
I was sitting in Silicon Valley, and a recruiter called me up after working in big tech at Cisco, Microsoft, and Oracle. I decided it was time to run my own show and fell in love with the opportunity of technology to transform the future of education, something I knew a little bit about.
Interesting. And where'd you grow up?
50-50. I grew up in the Midwest outside of Chicago, Illinois, and also Richmond, Virginia. Moved there when I was 10.
All right, so let's stay with the 8 years old and before that. So you have any brothers and sisters?
I do. I'm one of 5. I have 3 sisters and 1 brother.
Where are you in the pecking order?
I'm 4th born.
4th out of 5. Does that bestow upon you any special privileges, being the 4th of 5?
I don't think there are any special privileges when you're 5. You got to make your way and find your identity.
Okay. What were Mom and Dad doing?
My mother was a teacher, got her master's in special education. My father got his master's in art and was a glassblower, and moved to Virginia to run the art department at Virginia Commonwealth University.
So both your parents were educated, and they were both teaching?
Yes, both teachers, professor. My mother was a teacher and then ran a center for students with disabilities at VCU.
Does this have any particular impact on you, having come from a family with both parents fairly well educated?
I never thought I would turn into my parents and run an education tech company, but it's been fantastic. Also, a big impact was my mother focused on students with disabilities, having a cousin who was Down syndrome, and knowing how important it was to create opportunities for everyone.
What's that got to do with what you do?
What I do today is to make sure that we serve higher education, provide opportunities for any student with technology and capabilities for universities and colleges, so every student has an opportunity for success.
Interesting. What are you thinking, Natalie?
In the green room, you mentioned that you were fascinated with conflict, so I was wondering if you could just speak to that.
Well, I think it was probably from very early days growing up, watching the news with my father, watching Walter Cronkite, and not having traveled a whole lot when I was younger, seeing the political conflict all over the world and just being fascinated with people from other countries.
And is there something you wanted to do growing up based off of that?
Well, oddly enough, after I moved to Virginia and in 8th grade, I had my history teacher ask the whole class what did they want to be when they grew up. I decided I wanted to be an ambassador. My teacher at the time said, nice thought, but quite frankly, those positions are reserved for men, but you'd make a great ambassador's wife. That sort of gave me the gumption and the drive to do what my mother said, which is I'm smart enough to be anything I want to be in my life.
So it kind of conflicted with what you were learning at home. Did you say something when that happened?
I don't think I said anything. I think I just checked it into a challenge, and I love a challenge. So it was the challenge of my life. I'm not an ambassador yet, but I still have time.
Mm-hmm. So your mother said that you could do anything. How did that play out in what she did and how the influence she had on you?
My mother ran her household. She had 5 children. She actually had 6. Her first child died. She managed the household. She worked full time. She had a lot of daughters and a son that helped out around the house. And it showed me that after she got her master's and her PhD when she was 57, she's a consummate overachiever. If she can do it, there's probably nothing I can't do too.
And how did she learn about that? And who was her role model?
Her role model probably was her mother. Her mother's very tough, as my mother is as well.
What did she do?
Well, my grandmother got divorced at a time in a small town that was probably relatively tough. She ran a plastics factory, and
she ran a plastics factory?
She did. She was running the factory floor, and even when she was sick and she lost a lung, when things broke down, they wheeled her in to make sure that the assembly lines and everything were set up the right way.
Was that
she
a
was
family business?
No, it wasn't. It was in a small part of Wisconsin, and she was great at math and figuring out how to make things work.
But you're coming from a family of strong women, grandparents, mother. As a woman, that had huge influence on you.
It did. I think it was the reason it set sail. I was curious. I'd like to try new things, take risks. I moved from a role running government affairs at Cisco to build and develop smart grid technologies, hardware and software. I can be a little bit fearless that way. I don't like to think about failure as an option. And it just, that's something that excites me.
And what do you bring from your grandmother and your mother into work every day?
I think it's about hard work. I think it's about thinking about others, creating opportunities for others, and making things happen, getting things done.
Who did that for you?
I had a great mentor that gave me a phenomenal opportunity at Cisco, the former CEO, John Chambers. who gave me an opportunity to start government affairs, who taught me that technology can truly transform the world. He taught me about leadership. The leader sets the tone and the pace, and that really grounds me every day. I think we already talked about you want to treat people the way you want to be treated, and I brought that home every day in what I do today, and with my family, and also with my career.
What are you thinking, Natalie?
Yeah, you mentioned you were 4 out of 5 with your siblings. What personality and role did you have compared to the others in your family?
I was very creative, music, art. We loved being outdoors. I don't know. I think it just shaped finding my pathway and being different from my sisters and my brother. I was pretty studious with my brother. He was the one who taught me how to think about math. When I had challenges, he would always repeat, go to the lowest common denominator. So that helped me out quite a bit. It's just really being part of the family, and it shaped who I am. And
you mentioned that you were less of a cook, you were more of a baker. How did that translate into your first job?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think it's just finding what fits for you. My sisters are phenomenal cooks. I am not. So baking was something I could be creative, and it was finding something that fit me well. And as I look and explore, it's just about being creative and finding opportunities that challenge me, and doing something that has an impact.
Did you work for your father at all?
I didn't work for my father. My sister actually did. He was a glass blower and a sculptor. I learned how to blow glass at an early age. And
so the kids were out playing sports.
Yeah, I played sports too. But no, I spent a lot of time doing art myself. And the money I made early on when I worked first at King's Dominion, I would oftentimes spend it on art supplies.
Really?
Yeah.
What were you doing at King's Dominion?
King's Dominion, my first job was running rides, the Apple Turnover, and
Excuse me, the Apple
Turnover. I don't know if it's still there, probably not, and the Octopus. Oftentimes in the hot heat of the summer, you would be hosing out the carts, as you might imagine, and then I was promoted, I guess, to guest services, and I would take VIP guests around the park, including, political leaders. My favorite one was Sugar Ray Leonard. He was very fun to tour around with his family.
So you were playing the role of ambassador back then,
Well, good point. I was an ambassador. Now I feel like I'm an ambassador of technology and higher education.
Interesting. What do you got there, Katie?
So you talked in the green room about playing the violin, playing the piano, being a gymnast, and diving. How did you get into all of those different activities?
I was just curious. I love learning. It fits me for this company, too, is just exploring and challenging yourself. And I grew up with a father who was a creative artist. My mother also was a potter, but it's the left brain and the right brain working together. And so I think there's just a great interplay with art and music and academics and language.
What do you mean?
It helps you think out of the box. I find some of my best engineers that I have at Ellucian are both musicians and engineers. There's a level of creativity that happens between the left and right brain that I think creates new opportunities.
I'm told there's also a lot of math there.
There's a lot of math, too. There's a lot of math.
Yeah, so how's that influence the way you lead? Because you've got this left brain, right brain thing going. You've got this all-inclusiveness and diversity, and you have a very different creative, if you will, way of going about things.
I think I got it from my parents. My mother was highly organized, got things done, never procrastinated. My father was more of the creative one, that he'd have the great idea, and ultimately things would get done. In a company, you both have to set structure, but also you have to inspire and think out of the box and look for great ideas from anyone in your company. I love ideating with my team. I love exploring the future and looking for a way to build more powerful capabilities for the customers that we serve.
Is there anything you can't do?
There are many things I can't do. You can ask my husband, my children, I'm sure my employees as well. For me, it's all about building a great team and finding exceptional individual contributors and leaders and flying in formation. And that's how I learn, too.
We've been speaking with Laura Ipsen, President and CEO of Ellucian. What's the website address there, Laura?
We are at Ellucian.com.
We've had a great lineup of guests today. Katie, would you like to run through who we've had?
We had Ahmed Ali, president and founder of Tista Science and Technology. David Yarkin, founder and CEO of Procurated. We had Tom Suder, president and founder of Atarc. And Laura Ipsen, president and CEO of Ellucian.
I'd like to thank all my co-hosts, Katie Brewer of the Brewer Group and Natalie Gosnell at Cressa for helping develop our storyline, hopefully delivering to our listening audience an entertaining and educational show. And I'd like to thank our listening audience for listening, otherwise we wouldn't have a radio show. Don't forget to visit our website, executiveleadersradio.com, to learn more about our executive leaders. Have a great day. Bye.